The Kennedy name still carries the weight of both glory and tragedy, and in 2025, a new generation stands at its crossroads. John F. Kennedy's grandson has grown up under the gaze of history, their every move measured against the myth of Camelot. Some embrace public service, others forge their own paths far from politics, but all remain tied to an unshakable legacy. The question now, will the Kennedy dynasty rise again, or finally rest in peace? Let's learn about the current lives of the Kennedy children. Rose Kennedy Schlossberg. In 2025, Rose Kennedy Schlossberg stands as one of the most intriguing figures in America's most mythologized family. A woman who carries the unmistakable elegance of her grandmother, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, yet has charted a path far removed from the glare of politics and power. At 37 years old, Rose has come to embody a modern version of Kennedy grace, thoughtful, reserved, and quietly creative. Where generations before her were defined by campaigns, scandals, and public service, Rose has chosen a subtler legacy, one built through art, storytelling, and introspection. Born in 1988 to Caroline Kennedy and Edwin Schlossberg, Rose grew up surrounded by the immense weight of the Kennedy name. Her mother was the U.S. ambassador to Japan and later to Australia, while her grandmother, Jackie O, remained an almost mythical presence in American culture. Yet Rose resisted becoming a symbol herself. Those who knew her at Harvard, where she graduated in 2010 with a degree in English, remember her as bright but unassuming. A young woman with an analytical mind and a sharp sense of humor, not someone eager to live out a family script. After Harvard, Rose's interests turned toward storytelling in the digital age. She studied at the New York University Tisch School of the Arts, where she honed her skills in film production and screenwriting. Rather than pursuing glossy Hollywood ambitions, she focused on small personal projects. One of her most notable early creations was the 2016 web series End Times Girls Club, a satirical take on post-apocalyptic survival told through the lens of two millennial women navigating chaos with DIY charm. It was a project that showcased Rose's intelligence and wit, a fresh, irreverent voice that poked fun at societal fears while celebrating female friendship. The series gained cult status among online audiences, revealing a Kennedy heir who wasn't afraid to laugh at the absurdity of modern life. That series also gave the public a glimpse of Rose's artistic personality. Unlike her grandmother's polished refinement, Rose's creativity was quirky and self-aware, rooted in humor and quiet rebellion. Yet the comparison between her and Jackie O was unavoidable. Both possessed a striking poise, expressive eyes, and an understated elegance that drew attention even when they sought none. In photos, Rose's resemblance to Jackie often startles admirers, as if the former First Lady had returned in a modern, more grounded form. By her mid-30s, Rose had fully stepped away from public fascination. While her younger sister Tatiana Schlossberg pursued journalism and environmental reporting, and her brother Jack Schlossberg briefly flirted with political appearances, Rose chose a different rhythm altogether. She found balance in a creative and culinary partnership with her wife, Rory McAuliffe, a chef known for her farm-to-table sensibilities. Together, they run a small restaurant on the East Coast, a cozy retreat where community, art, and food intertwine. Friends describe the place as quietly vibrant, an environment that reflects both women's love of authenticity and simplicity. Their life together is intentionally private. While most Kennedys have lived under the flash of cameras, Rose and Rory have built a life defined by intimacy, creativity, and purpose rather than prestige. They split their time between managing their restaurant and collaborating on small artistic projects, photography exhibits, short films, and community storytelling initiatives. Rose is said to prefer working behind the scenes, chronicling the beauty of ordinary people and their quiet acts of resilience. In 2025, Rose is developing her most ambitious project yet, a documentary exploring women and resilience, a theme that resonates deeply with her family's history. The Kennedys, after all, have endured triumphs and tragedies unlike any other American dynasty. Yet Rose's interest is less about recounting her lineage and more about capturing the universal strength of women, those who endure loss, rebuild from crisis, and find grace in imperfection. Her approach is observational, not nostalgic. She's not trying to rewrite history, but rather to watch it unfold, frame by frame, through the lives of others. Those close to her say that Rose's creative style mirrors the quiet confidence of her grandmother, but speaks in a different language, not one of society columns and tailored suits, but of empathy, humor, and emotional truth. She often draws from her own family's resilience, from Jackie's reinvention after tragedy, from Caroline's calm diplomacy, and from the quieter lessons of surviving within one of the world's most scrutinized families. Rose understands that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply persists. Though she rarely gives interviews, those who have met her describe her as soft-spoken, yet deeply perceptive. She listens more than she talks, preferring long conversations about literature, cinema, and philosophy to the kind of surface-level chatter that fame attracts. Her circle of friends is small but loyal, filled with artists, filmmakers, and writers who share her belief that creativity can be both a refuge and a form of activism. Rose's quiet evolution offers a striking contrast to the turbulent legacy of the Kennedy name. While past generations have wrestled with the burdens of political ambition and public tragedy, she represents a gentler, more contemplative chapter in the family saga, one defined not by power or glamour but by introspection and empathy. She has become, in many ways, the modern echo of Jackie O, not because she imitates her, but because she embodies her spirit in a different era, poised, intelligent, independent, and quietly transformative. As America continues to romanticize the Kennedy dynasty, Rose seems to exist outside that mythology, grounded, modern, and free. She's not trying to resurrect Camelot. She's simply living her truth within its shadow. Her art may never fill theaters or command headlines, but that's never been the goal. Instead, her legacy is being built one small human story at a time, through the lens of a camera, the rhythm of a kitchen, and the quiet strength that defines her life. Tatiana Kennedy Schlossberg. In 2025, Tatiana Kennedy Schlossberg stands as one of the most intellectually grounded and morally driven members of the Kennedy dynasty, a family whose name has long been synonymous with ambition, glamour, and public service. Yet Tatiana's contribution to that legacy is defined not by campaign trails or political speeches, but by the precision of her words and the clarity of her convictions. At 35 years old, she has emerged as a voice of conscience in a world overwhelmed by environmental crisis and digital noise, using journalism as her platform to fight for the planet. One fact, one essay, one revelation at a time. Born in 1990 to Caroline Kennedy and Edwin Schlossberg, Tatiana grew up in a home where intellect and public duty were inseparable. Her maternal grandfather, President John F. Kennedy, spoke of civic responsibility and courage. Her grandmother, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, embodied grace and intellectual curiosity. From them, Tatiana inherited a quiet determination, the belief that ideas, when paired with purpose, can shape the world. But unlike many Kennedys before her, she chose to build influence not through politics, but through the written word. Educated at Yale University, where she earned her degree in history, and later at Oxford University, Tatiana developed a deep understanding of how environmental issues intertwine with economics, culture, and social justice. Her early journalism, published in the New York Times, The Atlantic, and The Washington Post, quickly earned her a reputation for meticulous research and an analytical style that favored truth over theatrics. She covered topics like climate policy, carbon footprints, and the hidden environmental costs of consumerism. often translating complex science into accessible, human-centered narratives. Her defining moment came with the publication of her 2019 book, Inconspicuous Consumption: The Environmental Impact You Don't Know You Have. It was a sharp, compelling, and darkly funny look at how our everyday habits, from streaming a movie to buying clothes, contribute to climate change. The book won critical acclaim for its originality and honesty, drawing praise for avoiding the self-righteous tone that often plagues environmental commentary. Tatiana didn't shame her readers. She educated them, revealing how sustainability is less about perfection and more about awareness. Through wit and empathy, she made sustainability relatable, a conversation rather than a command. By the mid-2020s, Tatiana had solidified her role as one of the most important journalistic voices in the climate movement. Her essays were not just about the environment, they were about the psychology of responsibility, how humans cope with knowing they are both the cause and the solution to the planet's crisis. In an age of climate fatigue, she offered nuance and hope without illusion. Universities and global organizations began inviting her to speak, and her guest lectures at places like Harvard, Oxford, and the United Nations drew audiences eager to hear how data could coexist with humanity. In her personal life, Tatiana has found balance in simplicity. She married Dr. George Moran, a physician she met during her time in New York, in a quiet ceremony that reflected her aversion to spectacle. The couple welcomed their first child in 2022, an event that, in a symbolic twist of fate, made John F. Kennedy a great-grandfather decades after his assassination. Motherhood changed Tatiana's worldview, not by softening her sense of urgency, but by deepening it. Her most recent writings reflect this shift. In essays published between 2023 and 2025, Tatiana explores the intersection of motherhood and climate anxiety, writing candidly about raising a child in an uncertain world. She examines how environmental fear intersects with parental love, and how future generations will inherit both the beauty and the fragility of Earth. Her reflections blend journalism with memoir, an unusual move for a Kennedy, but one that makes her work profoundly human. In one essay, she described watching her child play in a park while thinking about air quality, writing, "Every breath my child takes connects to choices made by people he will never meet, choices we are still making now." That intimate tone has redefined Tatiana's career. She no longer writes solely as a journalist reporting facts, but as a storyteller chronicling conscience. Her words carry both warning and tenderness, making her one of the few modern environmental writers who can appeal to scientists, activists, and everyday readers alike. In 2025, she is reportedly working on a new book project that explores climate ethics in the context of family life, how our personal relationships, emotions, and daily choices shape the moral dimension of environmental responsibility. Tatiana's style, calm, reflective, and intellectually fierce, feels both old and new within the Kennedy tradition. Where her grandfather inspired through rhetoric, she moves readers through reason. Where earlier Kennedys sought to lead nations, she leads conversations. Her weapon is not policy, but perspective. Her ambition, not power, but clarity. Despite her influence, Tatiana avoids celebrity. She rarely gives interviews, maintains no public social media presence, and guards her family's privacy with quiet determination. Friends describe her as thoughtful and funny, more likely to discuss a new study on microplastics than family history. Yet when she does speak of her heritage, she acknowledges it with humility. She has often said that her grandfather's call to service, "Ask not what your country can do for you," still guides her, but in a different way register. Her service is to truth, her country the planet itself. The parallels between Tatiana and her forebears are unmistakable. Like John F. Kennedy, she believes in progress driven by knowledge. Like Jackie O, she values intellect over spectacle. But Tatiana's voice belongs firmly to her generation, one facing existential crises her ancestors could never have imagined. She represents a new kind of Kennedy legacy, Less about power and more about purpose, less about commanding crowds and more about connecting minds. Jack Schlossberg. Until now, John Jack Bouvier Kennedy Schlossberg has become the living bridge between the Kennedy myth and the modern world. A man who carries the weight of a dynasty, yet refuses to be crushed by it. At 32 years old, Jack is the youngest child of Caroline Kennedy and Edwin Schlossberg, and the only grandson of President John F. Kennedy. With his sharp intellect, charm, and unmistakable resemblance to his uncle John F. Kennedy, Jr., Jack stands as both heir and innovator, the charismatic face of the new Kennedy generation, equally comfortable quoting his grandfather's speeches as he is cracking self-deprecating jokes online. From an early age, Jack's life carried the glow of destiny. Born in 1993 in New York City, he grew up surrounded by family history that loomed larger than life. Portraits of Camelot hung on the walls, and stories of courage, loss, and public service shaped the rhythm of family conversation. Yet his parents made sure that his childhood was as normal as possible. Caroline Kennedy, the sole surviving child of JFK and Jackie O, was determined to give her children privacy and independence. Jack attended the Brearley and collegiate schools in Manhattan before heading to Yale University, where he graduated in 2015 with a degree in history and a reputation for being witty, engaging, and academically curious. At Yale, Jack's interests extended beyond politics. He wrote for the Yale Herald and volunteered in environmental and community initiatives. Those close to him recall his charisma and humor, qualities that made him instantly popular but never arrogant. After Yale, Jack enrolled in Harvard Law School and later pursued a joint MBA at Harvard Business School, combining legal rigor with strategic thinking. The double degree reflected not just ambition, but intention. Jack was shaping himself into someone capable of leading in both public and private arenas, perhaps with the long view of entering public service one day. The Kennedy legacy has always been a complicated inheritance, equal parts inspiration and burden. But Jack has navigated it with an unusual mix of grace and self-awareness. He is often seen as the Kennedy heir with the best chance of rekindling the family's political flame, yet he doesn't treat that legacy as a script he must perform. Instead, he uses it as a foundation on which to build his own voice. His speeches at the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation and various public events reveal a young man fluent in history, but unafraid of humor. "I'm inspired by my grandfather's words," he once said in a speech, "but I'm also trying to figure out what they mean for me and for my generation." In the age of social media, Jack has found a way to humanize the Kennedy mystique. His occasional Instagram posts blend intelligence with a wink of irreverence, a rare glimpse of humor in a family so often portrayed through solemn nostalgia. Whether he's making fun of his own haircuts, teasing political speculation, or posting photos of ocean cleanup work, Jack uses his digital presence to bridge the gap between old-school legacy and modern authenticity. He is both aware of the myth he represents and careful not to become trapped by it. In 2025, Jack's life has taken a more purposeful turn. He has begun working with a non-profit organization focused on ocean conservation, a cause that reflects his deep concern for the planet and the future his generation will inherit. Environmental stewardship runs naturally through the Kennedy line, from JFK's passion for the sea to his uncle Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s environmental activism. But Jack's approach is distinctly modern. He uses social media, storytelling, and public appearances to raise awareness, combining policy insight with a relatable voice that connects with young audiences. His work focuses on marine biodiversity, pollution prevention, and coastal protection, causes that blend environmental science with human empathy. Those close to him describe Jack as both thoughtful and playful, someone who can discuss climate policy one moment and laugh about pop culture the next. He often references his grandfather's belief that public service is a noble calling, but he applies it through a 21st-century lens, one that includes digital advocacy, community engagement, and inclusive communication. He's not chasing nostalgia. He's rewriting what it means to serve. Still, whispers persist about a potential political career. Insiders and family friends hint that Jack is testing the waters, attending more public events, meeting policy experts, and quietly building relationships with local and national organizations. His appearances at environmental summits and civic panels in 2024 and 2025 suggest a man preparing for a larger stage, though perhaps not immediately. When asked directly about politics, Jack often deflects with humor, saying things like, "I'm still trying to pay off my law school loans." Yet his demeanor, his intellect, and his natural ease before cameras remind many of the qualities that once made JFK and RFK household names. Despite the speculation, Jack's path remains refreshingly deliberate. He's in no rush to run for office or capitalize on his lineage. Instead, he's investing time in understanding the world he may one day hope to change. His generation faces challenges that no Kennedy before him could have imagined: climate change, digital disinformation, political polarization, and Jack's responses show a desire to engage with those realities on their own terms, not through nostalgia, In private, Jack is said to be close to his sisters, Rose and Tatiana, and deeply devoted to his mother. When Carolyn served as the U.S. ambassador to Japan and later to Australia, Jack occasionally joined her at formal events, quietly absorbing lessons about diplomacy and global engagement. Those experiences, friends say, shaped his worldview, giving him a global perspective and a respect for cultural nuance that will serve him well if he ever enters politics. What sets Jack apart from many of his forebears is his ability to balance the burden and brilliance of his name. He knows that every gesture, every speech, every photograph will be compared to those of his grandfather and uncle. Yet rather than reject that weight, he wears it lightly. He honors the Kennedy ideals: courage, service, curiosity, but updates them with humor, modernity, and self-awareness. In an era where authenticity is valued more than grandeur, Jack represents a new kind of Kennedy, one who can command attention without commanding a podium. Caroline Kennedy. Caroline Bouvier. Kennedy stands as the enduring heart of the Kennedy legacy, the last living child of President John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, and the woman who has carried the family's torch with the same quiet elegance and resilience that defined her parents. At 67 years old, Caroline remains a symbol of both continuity and conscience, embodying the Kennedy ideal of public service while living a life grounded in intellect, diplomacy, and quiet strength. Her presence, whether at a diplomatic reception or a family gathering, carries that unmistakable echo of Camelot, the mythic era her parents once represented, now kept alive through her calm, steady grace. Born on November 27, 1957, in the White House's golden age, Caroline was America's darling long before she could understand the weight of her family name. As a child, she played in the corridors of power, photographed alongside her father and brother, John F. Kennedy Jr., in moments of rare innocence that captured the nation's heart. But tragedy struck early. At just 5 years old, she lost her father to an assassin's bullet, and decades later, she would endure the loss of her mother and brother, each loss reshaping her into a woman defined not by grief, but by resolve. Those who know her well say that Caroline learned from tragedy the same lesson that guided her father's presidency: to find purpose in pain and to serve rather than retreat. Her life after Camelot was not spent in nostalgia, but in action. Educated at Radcliffe College, now part of Harvard University, and later at Columbia Law School, Caroline built a career rooted in civic engagement, law, and education. She worked as an attorney, writer, and cultural advocate, co-editing several best-selling anthologies such as Profiles in Courage for Our Time, which honored contemporary public figures who embodied her father's ideals. Over the years, she became a fixture in New York's philanthropic circles, not as a socialite, but as a tireless advocate for public education and constitutional literacy. Her work with the Fund for Public Schools in New York City helped raise millions to improve classroom experiences for underserved children, earning her respect as a leader who preferred action over acclaim. Caroline's transition into diplomacy came naturally. In 2013, President Barack Obama appointed her as the U.S. ambassador to Japan, making her the first woman to hold that position. The appointment marked her full emergence as a stateswoman in her own right, not merely as a Kennedy, but as a modern diplomat with vision and empathy. In Tokyo, she became a bridge between cultures, respected for her intelligence, humility, and quiet strength. She attended the 70th anniversary of the Hiroshima bombing, offered heartfelt tributes to survivors, and championed U.S.-Japan relations during a pivotal time in the Asia-Pacific region. Her grace and steadiness in moments of political complexity drew comparisons to her mother's composure and her father's courage. When she completed her tenure in Japan in 2017, Caroline returned to the U.S. with even greater diplomatic credibility. In 2022, President Joe Biden appointed her as U.S. Ambassador to Australia, where she once again excelled. There, she worked to strengthen alliances in the Indo-Pacific, promote renewable energy cooperation, and support regional stability amid growing global tensions. Australian officials praised her professionalism and warmth, often noting how approachable she was despite her legendary surname. As one Australian diplomat put it, Caroline Kennedy carries the aura of history, but the heart of a modern leader. Even as she navigated the demands of diplomacy, Caroline never abandoned her connection to her family's legacy at home. Through her leadership with the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, she has continued to promote civic engagement, courage in public life, and artistic expression. Under her guidance, the foundation has expanded programs for young leaders, honored global human rights advocates, and embraced digital initiatives to bring her father's vision into the 21st century. Each year, she personally presents the Profile in Courage Award, honoring individuals who demonstrate political bravery, an award that not only reflects her father's words, but her own belief that integrity is the truest measure of leadership. Despite her public roles, Caroline has remained remarkably private. She has always shunned the glitz of celebrity that so often surrounds the Kennedy name, preferring to let her work speak for her. Friends describe her as reserved but deeply compassionate, someone who values family, literature, and the quiet beauty of Cape Cod summers over the spotlight. In recent years, her life has shifted toward a more personal rhythm. Now a grandmother, she delights in spending time with her children, Rose, Tatiana, and Jack Schlossberg, and her young grandchild, who continues the Kennedy lineage into a new century. Caroline divides her time between New York and Massachusetts, balancing her private family moments with the occasional diplomatic event or public appearance. Yet every time she steps onto a stage or speaks at a memorial, there's an almost electric reverence in the air. Her voice, calm and low, carries the cadence of her father's speeches and the poise of her mother's presence. She doesn't need to invoke Camelot. Her very existence does it for her. Observers often note that Caroline's leadership reflects a different kind of Kennedy charisma, one built on intellect, empathy, and quiet strength rather than the fiery rhetoric of past generations. She represents an evolution of the Kennedy ethos: service without spectacle, diplomacy without ego, and grace without pretense. She has spent her life proving that influence can be exercised with gentleness, and that legacy is not preserved through myth-making, but through living example. John F. Kennedy, Jr. Gone, but never forgotten. Those words have echoed through American history ever since the night of July 16, 1999, when John F. Kennedy, Jr., his wife Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, and her sister Lauren Bessette perished in a plane crash off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. He was only 38, a man just coming into his prime, with the world still believing that his destiny was somehow intertwined with the promise left unfulfilled by his father, President John F. Kennedy. To many, he was more than a celebrity or political heir. He was the embodiment of America's lingering fascination with Camelot, a living reminder of what might have been and what was lost too soon. Born on November 25, 1960, just 2 weeks after his father's historic election victory, John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr. came into the world already carrying the weight of expectation. His very birth was a national celebration, and his earliest years were spent in the White House, a playground like no other. The public first glimpsed his charm at his father's funeral, when little John saluted his father's casket, a moment frozen in time that would come to define his life. That salute, innocent, heartbreaking, and iconic, captured the nation's grief and became a symbol of resilience amid tragedy. Growing up in the long shadow of his family's legacy was both a privilege and a burden. The Kennedy name opened every door, yet it also came with unrelenting scrutiny. John Jr. attended Brown University and later New York University School of Law, where he graduated in 1989. Despite his natural charisma and family background, his early career was not without struggle. He failed the New York bar exam twice before passing on his third attempt, a detail that humanized him to an adoring yet demanding public. Those who knew him often described him as charming but humble, a man who tried to define himself outside the constraints of politics and lineage. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, JFK Jr. became a fixture of New York society. His good looks, charm, and athleticism made him a tabloid sensation, though he often resisted that role. Whether cycling through Central Park or attending charity events, he was followed relentlessly by the paparazzi. But beneath the glossy photos, John was searching for purpose, something meaningful that would honor his father's ideals without succumbing to the circus of fame. That search found expression in George, the political and lifestyle magazine he co-founded in 1995. The concept was bold, a magazine that would bridge politics and pop culture, making civic engagement appealing to a new generation. The tagline, "Not just politics as usual," captured John's vision perfectly. George was irreverent yet thoughtful, and it reflected his belief that democracy could be exciting, dynamic, and accessible. Although critics were divided and the magazine faced financial challenges, John's editorial courage impressed many. He was serious about ideas, passionate about civic duty, and determined to prove that he was more than just a famous name. In his personal life, John found love with Carolyn Bessette, a beautiful and sophisticated publicist for Calvin Klein. Their relationship, though deeply romantic, was also fraught with the pressures of fame. They married in a secret ceremony in 1996 on Cumberland Island, Georgia, in a candlelit chapel surrounded only by close friends and family. For a moment, it seemed like a modern fairy tale. America's prince had found his princess. But the relentless tabloid attention, combined with the couple's differing personalities and John's growing professional pressures, made their short marriage complicated. Still, those close to them insist that, despite the struggles, their bond was built on genuine love. Tragedy struck on that fateful summer night in 1999 when John piloted his Piper Saratoga plane to Martha's Vineyard for a family wedding. Flying into hazy conditions, the plane disappeared from radar, sparking a nationwide search that ended in heartbreak. The recovery of the wreckage confirmed the nation's worst fears. The news stunned America. It wasn't just another Kennedy tragedy. It felt like the curtain falling on Camelot itself. Millions mourned a man who symbolized grace, decency, and possibility. A life that could have bridged America's fractured political and cultural landscape. In the decades since his death, John F. Kennedy Jr. has remained an enduring cultural figure. Books, documentaries, and retrospectives continue to explore his life and speculate about his future, the political career he might have pursued, the reformer he could have become. Many close to him believed he was preparing for public office, perhaps even a run for the Senate or someday the presidency. In the years before his death, polls consistently showed that Americans saw him as one of the most admired men in the country, despite never holding elected office. He represented a rare combination of charisma and humility, the kind of figure that could have reignited faith in public service. What do you think about John F. Kennedy's grandchildren? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.